This is Africa News, and Congolese troops continue to seek out M23 rebels holed up in the forests after having been routed from their last stronghold yesterday. Also, the International Criminal Court apologizes for more delays to the crimes against humanity trial of Kenya's president. And we join our correspondent on the high seas of the Gulf of Guinea for a joint anti-piracy naval exercise. First up, though, the Congolese army's kept up its efforts to flush out M23 rebels still hiding in the forest along the border of Rwanda and Uganda. This a day after they were driven from the last of the towns they had seized over a 20-month rebellion.
Many residents of Bunagana took to the streets to cheer on the Congolese army. It had just chased the M23 rebels away from their stronghold. The Congolese soldiers have sometimes been accused of carrying out atrocities. But here, locals claim the rebels did the same thing.
They raped women in the fields. Everyone was harassed, and we could no longer work. They took the little money we had. We were paying taxes without knowing why. Today we thank God because state authority is back and the government liberated us from these people.
The Congolese soldiers celebrated the M23's retreat. But President Joseph Kabila, in an address to the nation, declared that a diplomatic option was still on the table. He asked the M23 to lay their weapons down.
I renew my call to the different elements of these armed groups, which are now dispersed across Congolese territory, to demobilize voluntarily.
We spoke to the head of the M23. He said that as long as the people of the region were marginalized, there would be no peace.
It's more important for the government to disarm us politically than militarily, because otherwise, after our death, others will continue our struggle.
The paradox is that fighting continued on Thursday, while in Kampala, representatives of the rebels and the government were sitting around the same negotiating table.
Now, the crimes against humanity trial against Kenya's president has again been put back. Uhuru Kenyatta was due before the International Criminal Court in The Hague on November 12th, but on Thursday, judges rescheduled proceedings until February 5th next year. Now, it's the latest setback in efforts to try Kenyatta over post-electoral violence in 2007. Kenyan Parliament voted to start a pullout of the ICC, and the African Union's called for no serving head of an African state to face ICC charges. Well, Senegalese barrister Hélène Cissé is part of the Committee for the Promotion of International Justice. The organisation is concerned about African victims' options if the ICC's reach is cut back.
Because African victims right now do not have any other possibilities to bring a criminal case against serious crimes before African Union judicial mechanism. So it's very important to support the work of the International Criminal Court, because this is right now the only concrete possibility for victims to access to justice for the most serious crimes.
So you're saying that Kenya's assertion that it is perfectly capable of trying its own cases and doesn't need the ICC to pursue justice, you don't think that actually stands up in fact?
Well, actually, we have to remind that in the Kenya case, before starting the prosecution, the prosecutor leaves some time to the Kenyan authorities to start the case, because this is the first duty of national governments to ensure effective prosecutions against the most serious crime. It's only when you can see that there is no will or that the state is not able to ensure an effective prosecution against the most serious crimes that the International Criminal Court has jurisdiction over the case. And that was the case in Kenya.
In other news, the soldier who led last year's coup that paved the way for an Islamist invasion in Mali has been summoned to appear before a judge. General Amadou Sanogo is being questioned over alleged attacks by his supporters on soldiers loyal to ousted President Amadou Touré. Well, Alex Duval-Smith is in Bamako. She joins us now. Alex, so what's the significance of this?
Time as to what Sanogo's fate would be. After the elections, he was promoted from captain to four-star general, giving the impression to a lot of people that he was actually in favor with the new president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. Now, for the first time in the last few days, we've been hearing rumors that he'd been arrested. Well, they turned out to be not true. What actually happened is that he's summoned to talk to a judge. Interestingly, the president of the International Criminal Court, Fatou Bensouda, is here at the moment. So we are aware that conversations are going on between the judiciary, the government, and possibly members of the Tuareg secessionists, and possibly also now General Sanogo, over how the legal outcome of the Malian crisis is going to be settled.
Now, Sanogo was only recently promoted, as you mentioned. Now he's under investigation. Does this mean he's fallen out of favour?
Well, I mean, it's very hard to say. We globally get the feeling that President Keïta sort of, you know, plays the, should we say that he is a civilian, and he plays up his distance with the army. But of course, it's very difficult for him because he could only really come to power with the army's blessing. The administration in power immediately before him was military, even though it was transitional, and he needed a great deal of support from them to be able to travel around the country and campaign everywhere. So he is close to the military. Just how personally close he is to Sanogo, and just how hard he's willing to play his democratic credentials against his closeness to the army is going to be very interesting to watch, because this country, Mali, has a long history of presidents being terrified of the army and of eternally creating a huge population of top brass because they're afraid of military coups.
Alex Duval-Smith there for us in Bamako. Thanks very much. Now, as things cool with Portugal, Angola's relations with France are warming up. On a trip to Luanda, French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said his country hoped to return the favour to José dos Santos while receiving the president in Paris next year. Well, Angola is Africa's second biggest oil producer, and France is keen to further boost economic ties. France 24's James Andre has been following Fabius's trip for us.
It had been 10 years since a French foreign affairs minister had visited Angola. So indeed, this is an important visit for both countries, and it is part of an effort on Laurent Fabius' behalf to try and boost what he calls economic diplomacy. The idea is to help French companies develop in countries which are not part of France's traditional influence zone. And indeed, Angola is a very interesting partner. The country is developing rapidly thanks to a rapid and massive influx of oil money. Oil is a field where France and Angola already cooperate, since most of the oil produced here is produced by Total, the French group. And so the idea is to develop business in different fields such as fresh water production or the agro-business. Laurent Fabius has also met with President dos Santos and his counterpart here in Angola. Talks have been mainly about visas, because indeed there is a big problem here for French people to come and work for French companies. There's a problem to get visas, and indeed now there is a political will to lift this problem bilaterally. On the other hand, there was also talks about the crisis in Central African Republic. Laurent Fabius asked President dos Santos if he would take part in a potential peacekeeping effort in the country, and he said he would indeed participate financially under certain conditions. And at last, well, President dos Santos is not a head of state that travels a lot, but he has promised to visit Paris next year in 2014.
France 24's James Andre there in Luanda for us. Now, a favourite for pirates on the prowl, the Gulf of Guinea has become Africa's most dangerous stretch of water. Planning for and practising how best to tackle this threat has become a priority for African navies on patrol. Caterina Vitozzi joined in on a joint South African and Ghanaian training mission.
On board with officers from the South African Maritime Reaction Squadron, or MRS. These pictures are from a small camera attached to one of the officers' helmets. In this training exercise, they must secure a hijacked Navy frigate. With them, 4 Ghanaian sailors, here in blue. When all the team's on board, they clear the interior. The MRS specialises in boarding hostile vessels. The Ghanaian Navy doesn't have an equivalent. They get coached on what to do as the team moves to the ship's control room. The pretend hijackers are neutralised in less than 5 minutes. The South Africans have led the same mentoring exercise with Namibian, Nigerian and Angolan navies too. It's crucial to get right. There's been more attacks this year off the west coast of Africa than anywhere else on the continent.
The threat of piracy has become pretty much the plague of the seas for us as African countries. Our resources are small and our budgets are strained. So I think there's an impetus for us to work together.
Modern-day pirates operating in the Gulf of Guinea use grenades and guns more than cutlasses. That extra firepower has helped them steal tens of millions of dollars worth of oil so far this year and take more than 130 people hostage. Regional Navy chiefs hope joint operations like this will be one way to make these waters safe.
That report sent by our Katerina Vitozzi. That does, though, wrap up African news for me. I will be back with more tomorrow, Net.
Thank you, Georgia. And do stay with us, because after a short break, I'll be back with more headlines.